Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Stephen Long. Welcome to the X Factor podcast. This is the podcast for leaders by leaders. My guest today is Rich Gannon. Rich is a former NFL quarterback who was selected to several Pro Bowls and was actually the NFL MVP. Hi, Rich. How you doing today?
Steve, it's great to be with you. I don't know if I should call you Dr. Steve, Coach. I was fortunate to be on the same team back at the University of Delaware, and it's always great to see you, brother.
Yeah, it's always great to see you. No, Steve is fine these days. Steve is fine. So why don't you tell people what you're doing these days?
Yeah, I was lucky. I graduated from the University of Delaware in 1987, and I was fortunate to play 17 years in the NFL. And when I retired from the National Football League in 2004, I went to work for CBS Sports in 2005, and still with CBS. I still do a show called NFL Monday QB, and I do NFL radio. I did that for 7 years and took a little hiatus, and I'm back doing NFL radio a couple of days a week on Sirius XM NFL radio. And I also do some stuff with the 33rd team with Mike Tannenbaum and his group. And so I keep busy and still, been around it. I've been around the NFL game for the better part of 37 years, and I love it. And I say all the time, Steve, I've never worked a day in my life. If you really love what you do, it's not work. And so I've been blessed to either play football or call NFL games or talk about it on television and the radio. And so it's been a great career, and I just, knock on wood, want to keep it going.
Some people are fortunate. I think you and I are in the same boat where, some people have a job, some people have a career, and some people have a calling. And like you said, it's just not work when you're doing stuff you love to do. So
it really is, and I tell young people all the time, people ask me for career advice, and I said, find something you're passionate about. If you're passionate about it, forget the money for a second, just find something you love to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're passionate about it, and you really want to work at it and you enjoy the process, then you're going to be good at it. Then you're going to be successful. And then certainly the money will come. But, for me as a young kid growing up, I started playing organized football in second grade. I mean, I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it, and was fortunate to play in high school and get an opportunity to go to the University of Delaware, and then, be a fourth round pick. I didn't come into the league with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I loved the process, Steve. I loved working and training and preparing and practice and studying and watching tape and really trying to put myself in a position to be successful each week.
Yeah, as our former head coach would call it, it's a discipline, and I think that was instilled in all of us back in the day.
You're right. I mean, I talk a lot about the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. I always tell young people, the best players that I played with, a lot of the Hall of Famers, there's certain characteristics, certain qualities that they have. And I think they're the hardest working and they're usually the smartest players. The guys that come in, they work really hard. They take a great deal of pride in their preparation performance, whether it's in the weight room, in the classroom, whether it's on the practice field. They do all the little things it takes to be successful. And that's really why, Steve, I played 17 years. I wasn't the most talented guy. I didn't have the strongest arm, but I really worked at my craft. I took a great deal of pride. I never wanted to be cut. I always made it difficult on coaches and general managers and owners to get rid of me. I really worked at it. And I think that's really important. That's why I try to have 2 young daughters, and one just graduated medical school. She's a doctor now. And another one who works in finance for Blackstone in New York City. I tell both of them all the time, I said, what are your core characteristics and qualities that you bring to the table? And I think, it's got to start with hard work. You got to be disciplined. You got to be dedicated. You got to be willing to work hard. And I think those are some qualities and characteristics that I learned from watching my father as a young boy.
Yeah. Nobody wins on talent alone. And, as a quarterback, you were the, leader on the field. And I'm wondering what was the best aspect of leadership for you?
Well, I think the best leaders are servants, right? I think, I go back to the best leaders that I can remember going back to the beginning of time. Jesus Christ, I go back to, great leaders that were generals that became presidents. The great leaders are willing to serve. They would never ask anyone on their team to do something that they wouldn't do. I think about Peyton Manning is a guy that I played in 4 Pro Bowls with, is a great leader. Tom Brady. they come in, they're the first ones in the building, they're the last to leave. They do all the little things it takes to be successful. And they wouldn't ask, a first year player, even a veteran player, to do something that they're not already doing. And, I think a lot of great leaders lead by example. You don't have to be the guy that's in the front of the room screaming and hollering all the time. Great leaders are the ones that are always prepared, that play at a certain level. I think they're the model of consistency. I think in our profession, anyway, football, it's all about consistency. Are you going to be a great player every time out? Or are you going to play really well for 3 weeks and then, not show up for a couple of weeks? And then, what can we expect from you? And I think when you watch quarterbacks like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and those type of players, Drew Brees, very rare that you pick up the sports page on a Monday morning and see that one of them threw 3 or 4 interceptions. They just put they put the team in a position to have a chance to win each week based on how they play.
Mm-hmm. This is something that that I try to teach my clients and get that message out, is that as the leader, you're constantly being watched. And so the role modeling has to be there, because that's how people learn. They may or may not listen to what the leader has to say, but they sure watch what the leader does, and then they'll model that behavior so they can be successful.
You're right. And unfortunately, Steve, there's different types of leaders. I played on some Raider teams in the late 90s and the early part of the 2000s where, we had some guys that you would classify as leaders, but they were leading in the wrong direction. They were guys that were late to the practice field, that guys that didn't study the game plan, guys that weren't great in the weight room, guys that were partying all the time. And, you got a young player that comes in and you see this older veteran player that's had success, and you say, well, I'm going to follow somebody, and as head coaches and as general managers, you want to have leaders in every room, right? You want to have a leader in the running back room, leader in the offensive line, leader in the defensive line room, leader with the linebackers. You want to have your best players, your core players be leaders. But I played on some teams where we had some guys leading in the wrong direction, and that's a challenge. I mean, that's a real challenge. You're never going to have 53 players that are all on board, that are all walking, hand in hand and step by step and all going in the right direction. You're going to have certain players that play for different reasons. Some guys play because they love it. Some guys play because they're making a lot of money. Some guys play because they like the notoriety and fame. Whatever your reasons are, you want to make sure that your leaders are the right type of leaders. And I've been on some teams where, you may not refer to it as leadership, but they're leading, they're leading guys astray. They're leading guys in the wrong direction. And those are the players that you have to eradicate from your locker room as soon as possible, because it's just too hard to win in the National Football League when you don't have guys that are totally committed.
Well, it's just too hard to be successful anywhere with those leaders. And, there are lots of definitions of leadership, but the one that I subscribe to is fairly simple, is that, a leader is somebody who has followers. And if you have that kind of leader who's leading them in the wrong direction, it shows that they do have followers, but they're a dangerous leader.
Yeah, you're right. And, I look at some of the core qualities and characteristics of some of the great leaders that I've been around. And I think they're selfless. They're willing to put others in front of themselves. They're willing to do the little things it takes to be successful. Sometimes it means, doing something different than you've trained to do. There's examples of players that have been asked to play a different position, or, go play defense when you're an offensive weapon. I think it's the players that are willing to put the team in front of themselves. I always say, as I evaluate quarterbacks, I say the great quarterbacks have the ability to absorb, right, as much of the criticism as possible when things aren't going well. And they also have the ability to deflect as much of the attention away from themselves and onto others when things are going well, right? So you stand up at the podium after a game and you just won and you threw for 4 touchdowns. Everyone wants to talk about you, and you say, hey, you know what? The offensive line played well, and the offensive coordinator did a great job, putting me in a position where I had a chance to make plays. And hey, how about some of those catches that Jerry Rice made or Tim Brown? And then at the same time, you go out and you play well, and the team loses. and they're looking for a scapegoat. And you say, well, so-and-so dropped the pass on third down the red zone, or so-and-so, didn't block well and give up a couple sacks. You say, you know what? I can help. I can do a better job stepping up in the pocket. I can do a better job getting the ball out on time. I could be a little bit more accurate. I could do a better job anticipating and not putting so-and-so in that situation. I think that's another sign of great leadership. The ability to stand tall, the ability to absorb some of the constructive criticism and sometimes unwarranted criticism, and also to understand you're there for a reason. And part of your role and responsibility in playing quarterback is to accept when things aren't going well, and also to deflect some of the attention away from yourself when things are going well.
Dean Smith had the exact same philosophy, the basketball coach in North Carolina. So do you believe that the primary leadership responsibility is accepting responsibility?
I think it's different. I would tell you in today's NFL, it's a challenge because nobody wants to get up there and have to criticize or call out or challenge another teammate for fear that they may in turn be criticized. I just know that there's some quarterbacks in our game that aren't comfortable in that situation. They just want to go out and play hard, and they have a different style of leadership. I just know the great ones that I've been around, they have very little patience when things don't go well and it's not going, people aren't doing the right thing. They're like the air traffic controller, Steve. You have an enormous responsibility. Or you're like the captain of the airplane. When you get on the airplane, you tell everyone where the emergency exits are. You tell everyone how to use the oxygen in the event of an emergency. You tell people about how to use the seatbelts. You have a big responsibility. As a quarterback, you have an enormous responsibility. And if it's not right, you have to speak up. If you're out on the practice field and the route's not getting run right, you don't necessarily wait for the receivers coach to make the correction. You make the correction. You're the captain of the ship, and you got to make sure it's done the way you want it done. I've seen Peyton Manning on a Friday stop practice and insist that we start the whole practice period over because it's not being done right. Correct a young player. Hey, the ball doesn't hit the ground on Fridays. We just don't do that. Yeah. We play and we practice to a certain standard. And when you operate and you function that way, and that's the world that you live in, that puts pressure on others inside the organization. I'll give you a great example. When Peyton Manning left the Colts and went to Denver, the minute he signed with the Denver Broncos, everybody in the organization got better. If you were in the equipment room, if you were in the training room, if you were an assistant coach, you were an offensive lineman, you realized we have a significant opportunity to do something special. And the same thing happened a couple of years ago when Tom Brady left the Patriots and went to Tampa. They went on to win a Super Bowl. But people realize when you have that type of leader, you have that type of Hall of Fame player, they have huge expectations for themselves, but also for those around them. And I think it's unique when you have somebody like that can come into your organization and dramatically impact the day-to-day function and operation of the organization just based on who they are, what they've done, and how they operate and how they perform.
My experience has shown that there's a lot of leaders, probably the majority of them, who are reluctant or even afraid, to provide that kind of feedback. But it's the leaders who are willing to give that honest feedback and spontaneous feedback, that instant feedback, who are successful, because feedback is proven to be the #1 predictor of performance. And so if you let it slide and you don't provide that feedback, it's just going to get worse. And so when you provide that feedback, both positive and negative, right, that's that significant impact that you're talking about. It just changes everything immediately.
Well, I think in order to really be a transformational leader and an effective leader, you have to have earned your stripes. In other words, you just can't walk into the building as a rookie and all of a sudden expect to be a leader. You can't get traded from one team to another team, having not been a major contributor and significant player at your position and expect to go to another team and all of a sudden have all the answers, right? Guys want to see it. guys want to know. Guys want to see your body of work before they'll get in line and follow you, right?
Mhm.
And for me, it was always a challenge early in my career. When I was in Minnesota, I was backing up early in my career, and then eventually I became a starter, but it really wasn't my team, Steve. The organization hadn't committed to me. Then I go to Kansas City. I get traded. I get traded to Washington and spent a year there, and was in Kansas City for 4 years. And it was never really my team, right? The coaching staff, I was kind of a backup. Got a chance to play a little bit. It really wasn't until 1999 that I went to the Raiders with Al Davis and John Gruden that I got a big contract. It was my team. I hadn't been to any Pro Bowls, but at that point, Steve, I didn't care. Like, I knew what I was doing was right. I knew that I was the hardest working guy in the building. I knew that I was the most prepared player when we stepped on the practice field. I understood the offense. And so I was an extension of John Gruden and the offensive coordinator in the huddle. And so I just said to myself, you know what? I know what's right. I'm going to trust my heart. I'm going to trust my instincts, and I'm just going to go do this. And I'm just not going to bow down to anybody. I'm just going to lead the way I know how to lead. I'm going to lead. I'm going to trust all the hard work and all that I've put into my career. I'm just going to let it hang out, and that's why I was an effective leader. I wasn't worried about what people were thinking. I wasn't worried about what the owner was going to do. I wasn't worried about getting cut. I wasn't worried about losing my starting job. I just knew that I gave the Raiders the best chance of winning each and every week. And I just thought, you know what I'm doing is right. I believed it wholeheartedly that it was right. And I thought I was going to be a beacon of change, because I knew that organization needed to change. It was an organization that lacked structure and discipline.
Mhm.
And that's what I was going to bring.
Well, your career is well documented, and it's unique in that it wasn't a comet. You had your peaks and valleys, and you did really good things everywhere you were. But it wasn't until the end of your career, that you really, got the recognition. But what a lot of people don't know, Rich, is that when you were drafted, everybody who was interested in you told you that they were interested in you as a quarterback. But when you were drafted by the Patriots, they were going to turn you into a multi-athlete. And this is what I want to find out, right? Is that you said no. And Coach Raymond actually got on the phone, because you didn't have an agent, and he set up the trade between the Patriots and the Vikings, right, for you. But you told people, no, I'm a quarterback. You wanted that responsibility to be that leader, right? So this is something I've been ruminating about for the past 35 years, because I was in the room when that happened, right? What was it within you that you knew that you wanted that responsibility?
Well, a certain belief that I had in myself, a certain confidence. I'd put a lot of work in. I just felt like, in fairness, Steve, I just felt like if I was going to go to an NFL training camp and change positions,
Mhm.
that I'd have very little chance of making the team, and I just thought, I was accepted to law school, and I thought to myself, I'm not going to waste 3 or 4 years of my life trying to make a football team, playing a position that I don't really know anything about. I started playing organized football in second grade, started playing quarterback then, and played, quarterback every season up until, my senior year at Delaware. And so I thought, why would I all of a sudden go play running back or defensive back for the Patriots? And so I told the Patriots, 6 days after the draft that, I'm just not going to come. I'm not going to come to your mini camp. I think you made a mistake. And if you don't trade me, I'm going to go to law school. And it wasn't like I had a lot of leverage, but I thought to myself, like, this doesn't make any sense.
Mhm.
And so they traded me to Minnesota, and I got a chance to watch and learn behind some veteran quarterbacks. But I think there's a certain belief system, and certain confidence that you have to play the position. I just felt like if I was put in a position and got some good coaching, got around a good system and some good players, that I could play and I could be successful. You know what I mean? And I think I always tell people, if you don't believe in yourself, nobody will. And I never forgot that as a young player. I had a lot of confidence. I think you need a lot of confidence to play quarterback at any level. You know what I mean? You have to have a belief in yourself that you can do it. And that was never an issue with me. I never doubted that I could make it. But I just wanted to make sure it was the right situation.
Well, what you say about belief is really powerful, because beliefs determine behavior. And when people have a really effective beliefs, behavior just changes and strengthens in ways that most people don't understand. And outside of the Delaware family, nobody knows this, is that you were never the guy, right? Maybe you were in high school, but even when you came into Delaware, there was an in-state quarterback who the coaching staff was deemed him as the number one freshman quarterback, but you beat him out pretty quickly. And then he transferred to UVA, where I was a graduate assistant, and I tried to keep an eye out on him right? Just because he was a Delaware guy. But this is the thing. This is, it's not so much the fallacy of talent, right? Because talent matters, right? But people have more talent than other people give them credit for, or what they give themselves credit for. And then to have that belief match that talent, to have that true self-confidence, that's where special things happen. And you're the living embodiment of that.
No, I appreciate that. Steve, I think there's a combination of factors. You mentioned talent. Yeah, obviously talent's important. You have to have talent. And we talked about the belief system, which is really important. But then the work ethic. I think it's a combination. I'm probably leaving a couple things out, but those three things are really important. I mean, obviously you have to have some talent to make it from the college game into the NFL game. You have to have a belief in yourself that you can do it. And then you have to work. You have to outwork the competition. And I just think that's the one thing that I was most proud of in my 17 years. I mean, I put the work in. I mean, I was a grinder. It wasn't for a lack of effort on my part. And that's so important. I tell young people that all the time. You got to be willing to just grind and work and fight and claw for every opportunity, because you never know when your opportunity is going to come. And when your opportunity comes, you got to be able to seize the moment, to be able to capitalize on it. You know what I mean? But you're not going to be able to do that if you're not prepared, right? You're not physically and mentally prepared for that opportunity. And so I just always stayed ready. Even as a backup quarterback, I tell people all the time, if you're not starting, it's really hard because you're not getting the reps in practice. You're having to learn on your own. You have to get as many reps as you have to stay sharp and, do it on the side, and you could be sitting there, in the middle of the third quarter, the quarterback goes down, and next thing you know, you're in the game, and you got to find a way to put your team in a position to have a chance to win. So I think all those life experiences helped prepare me for the opportunity that I finally got in Oakland in 1999.
I've done some work in CEO succession, and when I work with somebody in that realm, I tell them, this is your only shot. And it pretty much is. People might get a shot to be a CEO one time. Right? And so you got to take your shot and you got to give it your best shot. And that's pretty much, in just about any industry, just like, your experience as an NFL quarterback. You were given one shot, but you capitalized on it.
Yeah, that's the beauty of our game. I mean, you just never know. I mean, we see players get hurt, you see players get cut, you see players get traded. Mm-hmm. It's just the one constant in our profession is change. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you have to be flexible. You know what I mean? You have to be willing to go out and just put it all on the line and do it at a level. Tubby said something to me I never forgot. When I was a young player at Delaware, he said, the minute you think you finally arrived, we're looking for someone better to replace you. And it's so true. I mean, like even in the NFL, like the minute like you think like, oh, now I'm a starting quarterback. Well, don't think for a second. The organization isn't looking to draft somebody who they can pay less money and, bring along. Like that's part of our profession. That's the competition part of it. You have to be able to be, you have to play at a certain level, and it's all about consistency. It's the consistency in your body of work. Are you the same player every day that you walk in the building? And I tell people all the time, in the NFL, you're being evaluated every day that you walk in the building. Are you early? Are you late? Are you prepared? Did you oversleep? Were you drinking the night before? You know what I mean? Do you know the game plan inside and out? You know what I mean? How are you in the weight room? How competitive are you in the practice field? What type of learner are you? Are you a type of learner that makes the same mistakes over and over again? Or can you make a mistake one time and quickly get it fixed and not make that same mistake again? you know, so you're constantly being evaluated. You know, we watch practice film every day. Every play is evaluated. Footwork, decision making, process. You know, so that's the world that I came from, and I really embraced it. You know, I like feedback. I like constructive criticism. I want to be coached. I think great players want to be coached.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're just saying exactly what CEOs would say, is that it's consistency is the main thing. So what advice would you give to other leaders regarding leadership effectiveness?
Well, Steve, I've had the good fortune, as I said, to be in the league for 17 years, and for the last 17 or 18 years, go around each week and call games. So you get a chance to really study teams by watching film. Then you go out into their building. You go to the practices on Friday, you interview the players and the coaches and the general managers, sometime the quarterbacks. You spend a lot of time with these teams. And I think there's 10 qualities and characteristics that to me, I think certainly distinguish what are some of the best organizations in all of professional football, but also I think carry over into other sports and other business endeavors. I mean, if you're a great organization, you have a great organization. Doesn't matter if it's in a Fortune 500 company or if it's in a National Football League. But I think all the great organizations that I've been a part of have great continuity and consistency and leadership at every level of the organization: owner, head coach, general manager, quarterback. And I look at my former team. Look what the Patriots have done over the last 2 decades. I mean, when Brady and Belichick were together, I mean, they went to 9 Super Bowls in 20 years. I mean, just think about that, right? And won 7 of them. It's an amazing run. And, you know, they pretty much dominated the AFC. They dominated the AFC East. And then I look at the organization that I played for, and the Raiders. And when I left the Raiders, they went through 10 seasons where they had 7 different head coaches and 12 quarterbacks. Now think about that. The Patriots had 1 head coach, 1 owner, and 1 quarterback, and the Raiders had 7 head coaches and 12 quarterbacks in 10 seasons. That's dysfunctional. That's a dysfunctional work environment, right? It's hard to train people when you're constantly firing coaches and putting in new systems. And so that's really important. Number 2, I think structure and discipline within the organization is so important. Like when I went to the Raiders, we lacked structure and discipline. It was a challenge. We had to overcome adversity in our own building and yet try and go to Denver and beat the Broncos. But I think structure and discipline, you know, there's guidelines and boundaries for every player. Every player knows their role, right? And when I was with Kansas City, we had a great head coach, Marty Schottenheimer. And regardless of who you were, whether you were a 5 or 6-time Pro Bowler, whether you were a rookie, just walked in the door, he treated everybody the same. We used to have a Wednesday meeting, team meeting, and the quarterbacks would come in at 7. The meeting would start at 8, but everyone knew to be in the meeting room at 7:55 because Marty Schottenheimer would always start that meeting early. So we were running a little bit late in our quarterback meeting, and so the offensive coordinator was Paul Hackett, and the quarterback coach was Mike McCarthy, who's now the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. So Mike, we start running from our meeting room over to Marty's meeting room, and it's about 7:56. And we go walking in, and Mike McCarthy walks in first, and he's got his big binder, the game plan binder, and he gets about 3 paces into the room, and Marty Schottenheimer throws him out of the meeting. And he says, "Don't ever come into my meeting room late." And so here he threw the coordinator, the quarterback coach, and all 3 quarterbacks out of the meeting. And so what was his point? The point is, I don't care who you are. I treat everyone the same. And when we start a meeting on time, and it's an important meeting, it's the first meeting of the week in terms of our game plan, you better be in that seat ready to go. And so that was a message that I never forgot. I'm talking about being consistent, but everyone understood there was great structure and discipline within the organization. As I said earlier, I think number 3, players are trained and believe in the plan. And that's so important. Like you have to really believe in a plan. You can't just draft a player and not develop them. You know, I mean, you have to be able to draft and develop them. Like the Raiders, they drafted Jamarcus Russell. They gave him $32 million over 3 years. And the guy, you know, was out of the league, and he wasn't ready to play. He was out of shape. He was overweight. They didn't do a good job drafting him. And identifying who the player was. And then once they got him in the building, developing him. We use that term, be a pro, right? And we'd say, be on time and know what to do. And Jamarcus Russell was one of those players that it wasn't that important to him. You know what I mean? And so everyone has to understand their role, and you have to be able to not only identify who the talent is, but you have to be able to train them within your organization. And I think the other thing, number 4, I'd say great organizations, if you look what they do, they have great communication that exists throughout the organization. Everybody understands their role. There's great feedback. There's great communication within the organization. Marty used to have this Wednesday game plan meeting, and Marty would spend a lot of time talking about how we're going to beat the Broncos. And he felt it was important for offensive players to understand what the defensive plan was, for defensive players to understand what the special teams plans were. And usually, Stephen, you know this as a coach, when there's a problem with the play, there's a breakdown, there's a sack, there's a problem with the quarterback throws interception. It's usually a communication issue. Someone didn't get the audible check. Someone didn't get the hand signal. Someone didn't clearly hear the call in the huddle, or clearly, know what to do based on what was said, at the line of scrimmage. And so communication is so critically important to what we do week in and week out in the National Football League. I think number 5, from an organization standpoint, you have to be strong enough internally to handle and deal with adversity, because at some point in the National Football League, adversity is coming, right? Somebody's going to get hurt. Your quarterback's going to go down for the season with a separated shoulder. I think back to the Chiefs a couple of years ago. They had 15 players go on IR, including 6 starters, and they still won the Super Bowl. We talked about the next man up philosophy, no excuses. It gets back to really training and developing your young people, but being strong enough to handle and deal with adversity. I think number 6, there's an unselfish attitude that really exists, and it permeates the entire building. We were talking about players that are willing to play another position. Troy Brown's a great example of that with the Patriots. He was a good receiver when they were winning their early Super Bowls, and Bill Belichick came to him at one point and said, "We're so banged up in the secondary, Troy, I need you to go play the dime position for us in the secondary." And Troy could have easily said, "Hey, coach, I'm a receiver and never been defensive back, and I don't want to go over and do that, and may cost me some money in terms of my next contract." He said, "Coach, put me where you need me to play." Unselfish attitude permeates the entire building. And, that's when you have players like that, you always have a chance to win. I think number 7, you have to have a plan and be able to replace good people from your organization. When you have success like the Patriots have had, you're going to lose coaches, right? You have good coordinators that leave and go to other places, become head coaches. Charlie Weiss left, Josh McDaniels left, Bill O'Brien left. You got to promote, and the Patriots historically have promoted from within, right? It gets back to training their young people, but they have the ability to replace good people in their organization. And I think that's when you're having success from an organizational perspective, you're going to lose good people. Do you have the ability to replace people from within your organization? And number 8, I say this to a lot of good people that I work with. The good people, the good organizations, they don't spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror at what they've accomplished. Now, I'm not saying that they don't go back and watch the film, Steve, and make corrections, right? You go back and you watch the film, you make the corrections, you evaluate what you did, you evaluate a deal structure, whatever. That's important. But they don't sit there and say, "Hey, we've won 4 in a row. We won 5 in a row. Hey, we just got done winning the Super Bowl." They are so focused on what's right in front of them that they don't spend a lot of time patting themselves on the back at what they just accomplished. So they don't spend a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror. I always tell young people, if you get into your automobile, you got this big sheet of glass in front of you. It's called a windshield. And if you look up, you got a little rearview mirror. Now, it serves its purpose, but we don't spend a ton of time as we're driving a car looking at the rearview mirror. We have to have our eyes focused on what's right in front of us. And number 9, I think we talked about the ability to handle adversity. I think good teams, Steve, have the ability to handle success. Good organizations have the ability to handle success. Like, I know in playing the National Football League, we win 4 or 5 in a row, and you would worry about, players letting their guard down. It's very, it's human nature to relax and rest on our laurels, right? But I think the great organizations have the ability to handle success. They quickly turn the page, they move on to the next challenge, and they're so focused, and they trust that process, right? That process that they have in place, and that structure, and that those core philosophies in terms of team building, that they're not really overly concerned about what they just accomplished. And finally, and I think maybe most importantly, Steve, you got to be doing it for the right reason. I think that's so important. You have to love what you're doing, and you have to be doing it for the right reason. And I went to a luau one time when I was in Hawaii at one of the Pro Bowls, and I ran into this Polynesian elder, and they were, they did the luau's with the flame throwing, and I got a chance to talk to him, and he said, "This is who we are. This is our culture. This is our belief system. This is our family. This is what we do for a living."
Mhm.
And he said they used this term. It was called kina ole, and what it means is flawlessness. And he says we do the right thing, the right way, uh, at the right time, in the right place, for the right reason, with the right feeling. And this is the key: the first time. Like, in other words, they don't go out and do it and make a mistake. Oh, we'll clean it up. Well, let's get. No, they go out and it's all about flawlessness. It's about execution. It's about precision. It's about attention to detail. And that's what they talk about. They say we do the right thing. We do it the right way. We do it at the right time. We do it in the right place. We do it with the right feeling. This is what we do. This is what we love to do.
Mhm.
And most importantly, we do it right the first time. And I just think that's
Yeah.
really important as you talk about building a successful organization in business or in team sports. You got to find people that love what they're doing. You got to find people that love competing, the people that want to come in and be a part of the process. People want to be a part of change. People want to be a part of building a culture that's conducive to learning and to winning. And I don't care if you're selling paper, you're selling cars, or you're trying to win a championship in the Super Bowl. There's a lot of the same common characteristics that go into building a successful organization.
It just proves that, leadership sets the culture. And, for a lot of first time leaders, they are either not aware of that fact or they abdicate that responsibility. And then they find out, well, wait a minute, this is a force that I have to, get ahead of, because it's just more powerful than anything else. And you just put it in just a beautiful way of these 10 principles. So I really appreciate that. So who were your role models, your leadership role models, and what did you learn from them?
Yeah, I don't know if there's one. I think my dad, when I was growing up, Steve, never played. I've never saw my dad ever throw a ball. People say, well, how'd you learn to throw a football? I had older brothers. I played in a neighborhood with a bunch of kids. My dad was always working. And so I never really learned, any sport from doing it with my father. But I did watch my dad get up every morning, really, before we got out of bed, and we'd be off to work. My dad was an attorney, and he would come home late at nights. He'd work a lot of weekends. He was a really good attorney, and he took a lot of pride in his clients, and making sure he was taking care of his clients. So I learned by watching the value of hard work. Like, my dad was a really hard worker. He grew up in the Depression. His parents were, both mom and dad were immigrated from Ireland, and they didn't have much. He grew up in Philadelphia, one of 10 kids, and so they had it tough. But like, my dad worked really hard. He went to graduated from high school and went into the Navy, and then eventually on the GI Bill went to Georgetown, and then eventually he was a Capitol police officer and saved some money, and eventually went to Georgetown Law School, and so really worked. I mean, he had to work at it. And so to me, like, when I think about a leader in a family, like, he really set the tone for how we went about our business, right? And I learned the value of hard work from my father, and so that was really important. There's been a lot of other great leaders. My mom, led in a different way. She raised 6 children, and was such a great example of kindness and gentleness and compassion and strength. And so, I think it starts there for me with my parents. I had some great mentors and role models. My high school football coach was terrific. Of course, had a chance to play for a Hall of Fame coach in college, and Tubby Raymond. And I mentioned, like, Marty Schottenheimer was a great football coach, and a lot of great teammates. I played with some Hall of Famers that were, great examples of doing things the right way and working hard. And so, I just I tried to be a sponge, Steve. I tried to learn a little bit from everyone.
Mm-hmm. All right. So to finish up, because you're such a hard worker, how do you relax? How do you celebrate?
Yeah, I think you celebrate. I'm not a big partier, obviously, but I think you celebrate the little milestones, right? Like I enjoy accomplishing something every day. I mean, it may sound crazy, but like I write notes, the things I got to get accomplished. And I just did a 3-hour radio show. Now I jump on with you, and then when I'm done, I'll do a couple of. But I just like to get things accomplished, right? And
Mhm.
when I do it, I want to make sure that I'm putting my best foot forward. I want to make sure that if I've got 40 minutes with you or an hour, it's my best 40 minutes. I give you my best stuff, and so I think you take pride in that, and I think you take pride in giving back. I think so many people along the way, Steve, whether it was, the volunteer coaches when I was in grade school or my high school football coach, people touched me along the way. People impacted my life. And so when there's an opportunity for me to help a young high school kid to go out on the field and to work with him in throwing, or a college player, or even an NFL player, or there's an opportunity for me to volunteer in the community or to give back. I mean, I think we're all called to serve, right? And so I think that's where I'm at the point in my life where my both daughters are out of the house and they're doing well, so I have an opportunity to do more, and I really relish and cherish those opportunities to give back.
Yeah, and that's a celebration in and of itself, isn't it?
It is. It
Yeah.
really is. I think we get so much, it's not the reason we do it, but when we do something like that and we volunteer, we give of our time and our talents, we usually walk away feeling pretty good about having helped somebody. We feel better about ourselves. And that's the beauty of serving, you know what I mean? And that's the beauty. That's part of our vocation as professionals.
Yeah, there's just joy in what we're giving to other people, and that's a celebration in of itself. So, well, Rich, I want to thank you for your time. This has been terrific. So I wish you the best of luck in whatever you're doing, and I know you're touching people in the rest of society in a great way. What people sports is so big in not only our culture but worldwide, but the NFL is so big in our country, and and the principles of leadership, the principles of human performance that are applied in sports and the NFL. I think business people are starting to come around and say, well, wait a minute, these things are applicable just about anywhere. And we can learn from people who are champions and how they performed at such a high level, and also were able to maintain their own identity without getting lost in an ego, and doing the right things for the right reasons. So I wanted to thank you personally for coming on to the X Factor, because your message is so powerful and so important.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. It's great being with you. It's great seeing you again.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks so much for listening in. We'll see you the next time on the X Factor.